You're listening to the Comic Crusaders Podcast. I am your host, Al Mega, CEO of Comic Crusaders and Undercover Capes. In this show, I'm sitting down with creators from all walks of life to talk about inspiration, process, the lessons they've learned, and a whole lot more. What up, everybody? Happy Tuesday. I'm your host, Al Mega of the Comic Crusaders Podcast. Welcome, one and all. And today, folks, I am so honored. We have a legendary letterer here in comics. You've seen her work. Trust you me. I know I have since I was a kid, and I'm like so honored to have her here. 30 years in the business across a plethora of publishers and styles. You've seen her do, Marvel, DC, manga even. I mean, come on, she's a boss. Who am I talking about? The one and only legendary Janice Chiang. How you doing today?
Hi, everyone. Hey, Al, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming on and joining us this morning, to give us a brief ride through that long and amazing career you've had. As we were discussing prior to you coming on, like you say, oh yeah, I worked on the Transformers. Like, oh, do I not know that? Because oh my God, I had almost every issue as a kid growing up. So it's wonderful to see the person behind those beautiful lettering that I was reading is here on screen today.
I made those balloons too. The one
hey. I love it. So Janice, let's talk. Let people know where you're originally from, and then let's start talking about the journey.
Okay. I grew up in Queens, New York. My parents both came from China, so we were the first generation born in this country. And in terms of language, we were the generation that had to figure out how to assimilate. So, learning English or anything with literature was really important. And someone asked me, well, did you read comics before you started working on them? And I said, of course, because it was in English. So we would read comic strips that were in the newspaper. And then, we would read like kids comics, Disney stuff. And then my cousins in California were real big comic readers. So they would send back issues that they were finished with.
Nowadays, no one does that.
No one, it's under everybody's bed or in the garage and shelved on the wall.
So, what part of Queens?
I grew up in East Elmhurst. It's like a mile from LaGuardia Airport, right? So every day, 8:00 in the morning, I would hear like some plane going over the house. So that was time to wake up, right?
Yeah, wake up time. Okay, day starts. Yeah, I'm originally from Brooklyn, Greenpoint, Brooklyn. So Elmhurst isn't too far from there. So yeah, I know the area very well, very well. So so you had your cousins sending you stuff in comics. When did the creative bug, bite you?
Well, my parents were in a hand laundry, right? So what that meant in the old days was, people didn't have washing machines and dryers at home. And they would bring dirty laundry. My dad would sort it and send it out to commercial laundry where they would, wash it. And then things that had to be ironed were separated and stuff. So when my dad ironed the shirts that needed to be, personally intended to, he'd always put a piece of paper in it. It was like what we would call like newsprint or penny paper. So we always had paper on hand, because my dad had a stack. And we didn't have a lot of money, so we had to be creative, right? So, we always had watercolors. We always had, pencils and crayons and markers. And my dad was like really, skillful. When he converted this old garage into his hand laundry business, he built all the shelves and stuff. So he had a lot of wood left over. So that was another source of creativity. We learned how to use hammer and nail, electric drill, screwdriver and stuff like that, and paint. So you're gonna laugh. When we were 11 years old, we were allowed to use a circular saw.
At 11?
No matter how much you weighed or whatever, by the age of 11, you graduated to that, right? So it was daunting, but I look back and I think, was my dad crazy? But he trained us since we were small. It's like I have a son, Calvin. I would never let him touch a buzzsaw.
Yeah, my mother wouldn't even trust me with one now at my age.
I know, but it's like he showed us, he gave us a skill, and it became really important because my older sister, Faye Chang, she's passed away. She was a community activist and a poet, a well-known poet for the Asian American literature genre, and a writer.
Wonderful.
So you can Google her afterwards. And what happened was she formed this organization called Basement Workshop with other Asian American people in the 70s. A lot of them came out of the anti-war movement, and also from organizing on college campuses for third world studies. So anyway, getting back to the buzzsaw, a lot of times they would get raw space. Like one location of Basement Workshop was in Lafayette Street. It was in a loft. So, it's a wide open space. So, to my sister, it represented opportunity, a place for people to gather from the community. So it's like, okay, let's build walls. So she was capable, she could do sheetrock, she could frame because of what our dad taught us. So these skills are really important for kids, to do crafts or work with their hands, get off the computer or the
Agreed.
phone, whatever tablet you're doing, engage in the 3D world. And for myself, when I'm lettering all day, I look forward to cooking, because I have to be conscious when I use a sharp knife. And it brings me back in the reality of everyday, life. And still, like, when I work on a computer, it's like a 2D world. It's like I'm totally focused.
Yeah.
And in another, storyline or another universe, basically. So
Okay.
anyway, that's a little about my background. And my mom was like equally talented. She would look at you and she could knit a sweater. Like,
Oh, really?
or
Having a whole conversation. Oh, look what I did while we were talking. Like, what the heck? I
so,
love it.
So she taught us how to knit, and my older sisters taught me how to knit and crochet and do embroidery, handcrafts. So we were plenty busy, in terms of aside from schoolwork and such. So that's where the art skills come from.
That's fantastic. So, what made you lead to wanting to do lettering, or was that something that just happened to fall onto your lap?
It just happened because in school I majored in art, and we all took honor classes. But what it goes back to is also when I was born in the mid-50s. It was during the Cold War, where China was an enemy of the U.S. So anyway, my parents will say, well, you really shouldn't make waves, take care of business, like look forward, have your focus like that. So we dove into our studies and our artwork. So, my background is fine arts. What's disturbing now is to see the anti-Asian hate, even
Oh,
from
yeah.
more, because I tell people ever since I was small, my parents trained us to have the third eye behind our back, to be aware of our surroundings, and don't walk into danger.
Yeah.
So,
That's a New York thing, even right there. That's that's the first street rule of New York. Even it's like watch your back, watch your surroundings, because you just don't know.
Exactly. And it's like even when upstate, when I leave my house, it's like I'm alert because the times are crazy. The past president, I'm not going to say his name.
Yeah, I understand. He spoke out of his ass and said many things that unfortunately,
and gathered a group of people speaking out of their behinds too, right?
Yeah,
that's a tragedy, and that's where we have to work back from. So in terms of comics, the storylines we deal with, or giving people flight and imagination to escape what's the reality, that's a strength of our medium.
Agree.
In terms of engaging people of all ages. And I worked for Marvel for about 25 years, I would say.
And how did you get into Marvel? How did you make that step in there?
Okay, but getting back to comics is when I was in college, I needed a job. So my sister gave Larry Hama a call because they were part of the group that formed Basement Workshop. So she said, my sister needs a job to make money to go to school. So, that's how it happened. So Larry Hama and Ralph Reese were at Neil Adams' continuity studio at that time. So both of them taught me like the lettering skills, more so Ralph in terms of the mechanics of, we had to use Ames Guide to rule lines because it was hand lettering. You letter right on the artwork. That was nerve-wracking. What?
Wow.
I touch this beautiful piece of art. Because as an artist, I can look at something and know what it takes to do that. The time, the heart, the effort, and the talent, the focus. So yeah, every time even when I letter digitally now, it's like, oh no, I don't want to cover anything. So I know by habit, it's like I'll make balloons like really tight with airspace, But personally, I don't like it, the ellipse close to the copy because it makes it difficult to read. So before I do final files, I'll just like look at it again, and usually I make the balloon like 103% larger just to give it breathing space. But getting back to continuity, so I learned my skills there. I did some lettering for Neil's business, but then I needed more work, so he gave me a referral to the Marvel Bullpen. So what I didn't know at that time, I learned later from friends like Jack Morelli, was there's a high school of art and design close by. Maybe it was like on 59th Street, and I think continuity was on 46th Street. So they had an internship program, either Marvel or Neil Studio. So a lot of guys like Dennis Cowan, Larry Hama, Ralph Reese, they all had gone to art and design. So that was a magnet school back then. It was either art and design or music and art. So because I was like a kid that never got in trouble, I never saw a guidance counselor, right? So I didn't even know about art and design. It's like if somebody told me, I would have gone there, right? So my friend Andre and I tried out for music and art. We got in, but then it was like an hour commute one way from my home. So it's like, I don't think so. So I went to my local high school, took all the art classes to the point where they ran out, and I was doing independent study my senior year. I was sitting there by myself.
Oh, wow, really? That's insane.
Doing it. But if you think about it, when you're a professional, that's what you do. When you accept a job as a freelancer, you're working by yourself unless you have a crew of people. But basically, you understanding the need of the client and then delivering on time. So this is a word for all young freelancers and mature freelancers. When you commit to a deadline, come in on time or earlier, because you never know what happens, especially in comics, writers or pencilers or inkers or colors, they need more time. Like we need time too. Don't get us wrong. We need time to do our work. So, be gracious and help the whole team out.
So, what's typical time then? That's interesting. That from a letterer's perspective on a page.
It depends on the copy, right? And the thing is, like, we have no control of editorial content. So something's like really wordy, and you can figure out how to cut it shorter. You can't touch it. Basically, when you given a finished script, you have to follow the script. You have to respect that. So depending on what's on the page, sometimes once in a blue moon you get a blank page. That's just art, because basically the artist wants the visuals to be impactful at that time. Actually, it's a writer who makes that call. Or sometimes I know with Storm King Comics, where I'm the lettering department, I letter everything that someone doesn't submit with a letter on the team. There will be elements that I'll add, like sound effects, or sometimes when the copy is too much, I'll break it up, just to let it breathe, because you don't want like a large balloon on somebody's back or covering some part of the storytelling. So at Storm King, I'm allowed to do that. And basically, like when I work with DC, I'll make that judgment call, and the editor does. If the editor doesn't like it, they can come back and tell me to put it back. But usually they'll leave it alone because they know I understand what I'm looking at.
Of course, 30 years of experience, Janice. I mean, who's gonna doubt you if you do something like, "Yo, listen, this is what it is."
Actually, right? Al, I should correct you. It's actually 40. Now.
40. Oh,
40.
man.
And then what happened was when I came into learning the skill with Larry and Ralph, and then working at Marvel in the bullpen, the head of the bullpen was Danny Crespi at that time. And what I learned was production skills, how to correct lettering. Sometimes, there'd be misspelling, or maybe there has to be a little change of copy to make the story sharper. We in the bullpen would get it, and what we would try to do is like imitate the letter of the story. So it was like skill learning. And then Danny would give me a couple of pages to letter, without lettering, just to get me used to the art. So I remember the first story I lettered was like an issue of Deathlock. Rich Buckler was the artist on that. I remember I was so nervous, and then I got to letter a Black Panther story.
Nice.
By Billy Graham and Don McGregor. And
Yeah,
it was
Big
funny.
Don, we know him.
It was funny because I forgot all about that until the Black Panther movie came out. And it's like, look, I've been in Wakanda since 1975. 2018, everybody shows up. So, that is a beauty of working in comics. We get to time travel. And, luckily with CGI that it can be adapted into movies where more people can see it. Not just comic fans know about it, but people can even listen, to the dialogue and stuff
See,
and
I'm
get into it. I was, it's like I had a moment of epiphany also with Doctor Strange.
ah,
Um, I led her that series. I think Randy Emberlin might have been the artist on that. So, because I spend so much time in the comic world, I don't watch superhero movies. Well, I watched
okay.
Wonder Woman, had to watch that. But as a rule, I don't. It was like, come on, it's like I've given so much of my life, this I need some space to breathe. But with Marvel movies, I would say to my husband, call me when Stan shows up.
Too funny.
When he's
Did
in
you
the
see
cameo.
Shang-Chi? Speaking
What?
of Marvel movies, did you see Shang-Chi?
Not yet, but I heard it's really great. Everybody, everyone's so enthusiastic, all friends of, from all backgrounds and ages. And they say, we want to see it again. But, I'm a big fan of Michelle Yeoh. She can kick ass.
Oh, hell yeah.
She can do anything. So I'm looking forward to that. And Awkwafina, I really like her. I like her
But she's
energy.
from Queens. She's like you.
Exactly. Northern Queens, right? Yeah. She's from our turf. So,
See, I'm curious, Simon, about when you talk about the Marvel bullpen and you coming up, to that and working there. Were
yeah.
you like one of a few women in the middle of all that? I mean, were you the
Well,
only woman? Or were you only POC woman, if you will?
oh, yeah, I was only POC woman, but there was a woman named Annette Kowecki who was like working there also. Her background was fine arts, and she lettered also and did corrections. And then she left and she went on to school. I think she became a psychologist or something. So yeah, there were women, and then Marie Severin was there,
Okay,
and
awesome.
Mary McPherson was like. There at that time and Flo Steinberg. So, there were women, but not on the editorial level. Not until I came back, I took a break in 75, because I was more interested in community activism and, organizing. So I took a break from 75 to 80. When I came back in 1980, thank goodness Louise Simonson was there.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, it was like, oh, yes, a woman, thank goodness. And she was instrumental in mentoring me and launching me back into comics. So I remember the first series she put me on was Conan the Barbarian. And
Oh,
John Buscema was the artist. So I was like, what? John Buscema would do warm-ups on the other side of the page, right? And they
yeah.
would flip it over and do the actual comics. So this guy draws like a Renaissance artist, right? And it was like, you want me to letter on this? And
Oh, man.
the first story, I penciled in my lettering. And then I came back and inked it. So it took like 2 hours a page, which is crazy.
Ooh,
Too much
wow.
time. The second story said, okay, we have this thing called snow paper, which is like whiteout, liquid paper. Okay, if I make a mistake, I have that, as part of my arsenal to like make sure it's correct. So yeah, I just dove in and yeah, yeah. I
And
told
so
go ahead.
now I want to say, is this the Don McGregor, Black Panther, Billy Graham that
Yeah,
you look at that? Look how dope that is.
yeah. So Billy had drawn the lettering there, and I just came in and inked it. And it was really funny because when I was looking at it, you see that caption that goes in perspective
Hmm.
before the credits on the route. So
Okay.
anyway, get this. This is my only second comic, right? So I decided to
Second.
take yeah,
Jeez.
I decided to take a creative leap. I said, no, that caption needs to go in perspective. Something's telling me that it should drive it because of the way the perspective of the title coming down. So what happened was there was an article about Billy Graham in the New York Times about his art and his life. And his daughter, actually his granddaughter, is trying to, she's had exhibit of his art and to make people remember his contribution. So I was reading the article and then I saw that title page And that caption, the way the direction was going, it's like, wait a minute, this looks familiar. And I'm looking on the rocks. I said, oh yeah, I did this. I don't know how many thousand pages before, but I could say that this and Deathlock basically launched me into comics. But I didn't
and
come back in 1980.
And I love that you say Deathlock because I love that character. Glad his first appearance. I even got the one from the Prestige series, the Michael Collins version. Conan, you're talking to a Conan lover trying to finish that original Marvel run. It's like, geez, you touched everything I love, woman.
You name it, I've done it.
Yeah. Oh, and this is part of what you were talking about with your community service?
Yeah. So anyway, with Basement Workshop, we had people who were artists, writers, teachers. So basically, how I sum it up is the civil rights came to the Black community and communities of color in the 60s. But in Chinatown came in the 70s. Because at the time, more college educated people were born in the first generation, second generation. There were not a lot of Asian people, right? So the only way you see people is like in a Chinatown. So we all got together and we took up community issues. This was based on police. Oh, no, this was not the police brutality. This was based on a construction in the middle of Chinatown where they knocked down like 3 rows of tenements and storefronts with this like mixed use building. And it was supposed to be people from different income living there. But the irony was there were no workers from Chinatown or, Chinese workers on the site. So the thinking was, well, you're building in our community with federal money. You owe us jobs. So what we did was we organized a community and we learned from this group in Brooklyn. It was, I forgot the name of the group. They were Black and Puerto Rican construction workers. They came to Chinatown and taught us skills of how to lock down a site. So basically, if you enter a site, they have to shut it down. So that's how I met my husband.
Wow, gangster, check that out.
He was at the time we didn't like each other. There was an age difference and we just met and it was so funny. He said, I thought you were so stuck up. Because, my thing is to observe before saying anything. So you can check out who's who, right? The silly people will be always talking about themselves or sucking up the oxygen in the room. So it's like, I'll stay away from them. I don't need to spend time because they'll just be talking about themselves, right? So my husband was the opposite because he was more familiar with the people organizing. He was always laughing and joking. And I would think it's like, oh my God, this guy's so goofy. But anyway, so he was one of the people who actually went on the site to shut it down. And he said one time he just climbed on a crane.
No.
And the guy goes, I don't mind not working. He said they were so, polite and, professional. It's like, sure, I don't want to work a day. Come in. So we did this lockdown, shutting down the site for a month. So finally they capitulated and offered 35 jobs that were divided with the Black and Puerto Rican construction workers and Asian, Chinese construction workers. And there were a couple of positions that were linked to Gouverneur Hospital. Because, part of the struggle, we were interested in healthcare, for the community, education and such. So this was one of the big struggles that everyone got together. I don't know if you had that poster about stopping police brutality. Oh, actually, this was a project with Basement Workshop where we did a fundraiser calendar. And this was my piece because at that time I was still thinking about, where do we fit in as Asian Americans, as Black people of color? Where are we in America? So at that time, this was like 75, I still felt there was that strong division. And I think now it still is the same.
Yeah, it hasn't changed. Nothing's really changed.
Much.
The fashion and stuff and the delivery, maybe, but it still hasn't changed.
Yeah, so we're talking about institutional racism that needs to be addressed. Reparations for slavery, to the people, descendants of slaves. And what the pandemic taught us was to stop and listen and open our hearts. And, I was so proud of all the young people and the people who took to the streets during the pandemic to protest the brutality of the murder of George Floyd. It was like I didn't watch a video till later on because I couldn't bear a look. And when you saw him alive, it was like, no wonder they felt he was threat, because he was alive. He was vigorous. He was a whole person. How dare you do that? How
Yeah,
dare you do that?
that video made me
Yeah,
so angry. I couldn't watch
yeah,
it. I want to
yeah.
like jump through the screen and like tackle one of the cops. I'm like, it's like,
I
damn.
know, and the young woman that was so brave to record it in history to let people see what was going on. And you know what was phenomenal about the murder of George Floyd, the action around it was global. Every country has to address their problem of racism. And
Agreed.
before his murder, there was the young man Aubrey, and before that was my good friend Christian Cooper, the bird watcher in Central Park. I worked with him in Marvel. He was
Oh,
my
wow.
assistant editor with Bobby Chase on Ghost Rider series, and then he became an editor, with his work. So, first it was like the thing with Chris, with that woman calling the cops to say, he was being aggressive. She feared for her life. That was like bullshit, you know.
Wow.
So that's why, we had that term Karen, and
Yeah.
titled the woman that's like lying. And you know, good for Chris for capturing on video. You can't deny what you see. So yeah, and luckily his sister was able to share online and get the word out on it. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, and this is 1975. I don't
Wow.
know where to
Not
put
to
you.
age you, but that's the year I was born.
Oh, really? Then it was a good year, right?
Wow. And even then, folks, look at that, still fighting police brutality and oppression. I mean, what's changed in 46 years
So
since then?
it's a struggle that every generation, whether you're born coming from another country and you're the generation, you know that it's their task is to assimilate, or even people who can claim they came on the original Mayflower. Every generation has to be taught about how to be a decent person, how to care for other people. It's not a thing you can take for granted, you
Mhm.
know. And in terms of healing this country or this world, people have to reach out, because this last administration, they drew a line in the sand. You with us or you with not with us. And before then, there was a lot of fence sitting. It's like, oh yeah, whatever. People diverted by whatever their phone or whatever.
Whatever new media device, right?
Yeah, whatever media device or social platform, where you're just posting selfies or duck lips. It's like, please stop. It's
Yes,
like,
please stop the duck
if
lips.
I met you, I know what you look like. Okay, so that's good enough. But the year of being shut in for the pandemic made people face really serious issues. A lot of people's livelihoods were threatened. The shelter for their families. Really crucial things that shown a mirror to the deficiency in our society, right? So,
And the machine itself.
yep. So let's get back to comics.
Yeah, like this awesome page that I couldn't stop looking at as a kid. Look at you. Look at the usage here. And I love how you say it's true. Your lettering is never obtrusive of the art, never obstructs it. Wonderful. Favorite villain
That
era.
yeah, that was something that was impressed on us at Neil Adams' studio, because a lot of comic artists came through, such as it was so funny because I'm so focused. I would just run into Larry and Ralph's office to show them the practice pages and learn other things. And I would run out, but the people in the studio at that time was Sergio Argonis, I
Ooh.
remember, and then Jack Abel. And then Terry Austin, I got to work with him a lot of stuff. He said, "Yeah, I was at Neil's studio with Bob Wyachek at that time." And I go, "Really?" I didn't notice you guys. Like, sorry.
That's crazy. I mean, you've been around legends in the industry yourself, being around as a great. And I mentioned Shang-Chi, and all of a sudden, look.
Yeah, it's like what's great. is with the CGI. You know, it's like Stan Lee always had a vision quest that he wanted to see these characters in movies, but it wasn't possible until CGI. So I know when they do a series such as Scarlet and Vision, I've lettered that series. Basically, I think I lettered all, and then I was on Master of Kung Fu for quite a while. So I know they have to read the source material, which are the comics. So I know they're looking at my lettering. Whether they acknowledge our team, because they'll acknowledge the artist or writer, but the rest of us,
Always.
yeah, good luck reading if the letterers don't come in.
Yeah, they forget about. Listen, I know there are very engaged letterers on social that are very adamant about, like, hey, if it wasn't for us, that you wouldn't see the words.
Exactly, and it's a twofold thing. It's like you have the visual storytelling with art, and then you have the written language of the story. So our job is like figure out how to weave it, and the best way I describe it is like, how do you represent the 3D world in a 2D world? So that's where the sound effects coming, and even the placement of the balloons and lettering elements, add to the cadence or the rhythm of the story. So because of hand lettering, it was like stuck on the art. You couldn't move it, so you had to be really careful about how you placed it, or how you actually execute it. But there were like times when there were rush jobs for hand art, so we would letter on something called vellum. It's basically a heavy tracing paper. So then the people in the bullpen would put the liquid paper in the back. They literally would paint it. That's like,
Wow.
And then when that dried, they would come in with rubber cement and paint that on, or there was something like a waxer. You would put a thin layer of wax, it would make it tacky to the page. So a lot of times when you see old art, you'll see some yellowing on it, and that's where balloons were pasted, or sound
Pasted.
effects.
That's too
Yeah.
funny. That's funny. Wow.
So old school, right?
Yeah, so different. I mean, oh, and look how gorgeous this is. The lettering on this page. Like, this again, also one of my favorite Ghostwriter runs, the Daniel Ketch
Really?
Ghostwriter. And I mean, text and then your lettering. I mean, look at this.
And Howard Mackey was a writer, and then
Yeah.
Gregory Wright was a colorist, and Bobby Chase is the editor. So this was the first series that Bobby was trusted with. And she said, Tom DeFalco said to her, run with it. Just like you're going to do what you need to do. And Tom DeFalco is one of those great guys who were always treated women as professionals. Of course, they were creepy guys. You stay away from them. And people ask me, well, how did you survive so long in a male-dominated industry? You find the decent people. And, everybody else, you don't get my time. They say something stupid, I'm not going to talk to you.
Yeah, respect your time. That's what I love telling people. Respect your time. So if somebody is negative, you know what? Respect your time. That's not the energy you want to be around, then goodbye. That's not how I want to spend my time. And I get that. That's 100. I love it. And look at this. You've touched every. I mean, is there a character you haven't done lettering for that you would love to do lettering for?
I don't. People ask me what's your favorite, this and that, and it's like my favorite is whatever I'm working on. That's the only way I can like clear my head and not, not use old tricks, because people, when they start digital lettering, would say sound effects, and it's like, that's not how you do like in hand lettering. You got to draw on site, looking at everything around you. So basically, that's how I digital letter. The skills I learned in hand lettering. So when I work with Storm King Comics, John and Sandy King Carpenter's company, I use only fonts that I design, and I translate it into digital fonts. So my hand lettering styles have another life in the digital world. So anything you see there is all, original to me. And that's why you can look at my digital lettering and know it's me. Because a lot of people, the technique is to buy comic style fonts and use that. But, coming as a hand letter, that's not my way. That's not my process of evolution. Not to mention when we had the transition from hand to digital, I was locked out of a lot of companies because they had their
Wow.
own lettering departments. So, I
Crazy.
developed my own style basically.
But how was that transition from the old school style to this new style? Did you get acclimated quickly? Was it easy, or
Well,
was there a steep learning curve?
well, with me, I'm so bad at direction physically, right? So we would go to a local mall, and my husband said to my son, "Hold on to your mother; she's going to get lost," which is true. So the thought of getting on a computer was like, oh my god, and a mouse. So actually, my good friend John Babcock showed me how to use Photoshop, photographer, and Illustrator. He showed me the digital process. At the time, people at Marvel, the bullpen people, were starting to do the digital lettering. So once I understood the equivalent of hand tools to digital tools, it was no problem. Once you go through that learning curve of your hair on fire on a roller coaster, it was fine. Because at that time in the mid '90s, there was no Apple Store, there was no Genius Bar. It's like with Adobe programs, it was like you would call a tech, and good luck if they could explain it. So a lot of people would call each other. It's like, well, I did this. Have you ever seen this happen? And then in terms of like upgrading the memory and stuff, you had to do it. So it's like, do you remember when the memory was like on glass?
Oh
You
wow!
probably-
No, I don't remember glass, but I remember the DIMMs, and I remember having to buy a motherboard with nothing on it, and then you had to buy all the cards to get the USB ports, the serial ports.
oh my
Yeah,
God, you literally built it.
yeah. So I built my computer from back in the day, and thank God now they actually make good ones at a low
I used to
price that I don't have
buy
to do
complete, right?
it. I come from the old school too, for no worries. Oh man, and look at this usage too. I mean, so do you recommend letterers to go ahead and find their own unique style and just use their own font?
Well, yeah, it's like it'll give variety to the work out there. If you know, it's funny because this is from a special anthology called Festival of Heroes that DC put out. So all the creators on in the book are Asian American or Asian. So this was the first for DC. Before that, there was a group who put out an anthology called Secret Identities, and the principal organizers on there was Jeff Yang, who you see a lot as a commentator and a cultural writer. Then there was Keith Chow, Jerry Ma, and Parry Shen. Parry Shen is really cool. He's an actor. He's been on General Hospital, right, on that series. But before that, it was funny. He was an intern at Marvel in like 1994. He said, and I remember seeing him in the bullpen one day because I would just like run into Marvel, drop off work, pick up work, and leave. I did not hang out per se
Okay.
because usually my husband and my son would come down the city. They'd be somewhere, and I'd have to go back and meet them. But I did see Parry in the bullpen. And then I didn't say anything because it's like, maybe it's not cool to say be effusive to this Chinese guy, older woman. So years later, we worked on the anthology Shattered, right? And I lettered all the stories except for one. One writer had a letter a friend do it for him. So we were just talking. I was like, "Yeah, I remember you, Parry."
Too funny.
I know because our community is so small. The comic community, the Asian American community. You'll run into somebody directly or somebody who knows somebody. And the arts too. It's that way. I'm sure you've had that experience many
Oh,
times.
absolutely. When people within the Latino community, absolutely, where we connect. Thankfully, I'm
Yeah,
starting to see a rise there. And good stuff. It's about time they keep opening the doors. You know,
exactly.
we shouldn't be banging on them. There should be a nice door that we could open easily.
Well,
And
we can create our own homes. In terms of
that's what I tell people. Form your own club. Don't beg to get. What? Show them how it's done. Then they'll start banging on your door. Oh, can we get those
exactly.
properties over here? Maybe,
Exactly.
maybe
Yeah, we're
not.
interested. We want to make a movie. That's a beauty of social media and the internet if used properly. It's like there's so much potential. because at the same time when we went from the hand lettering to digital, there also, with the internet being more widespread, also you see people doing comic series, web series that they created themselves. So at that time, it was sort of like the Wild West. It was open to anything, and there was opportunity. And that's when people started designing all kinds of apps and stuff, right? So it was a good flow period in terms of opportunity. If you had the wherewithal, if you had the drive and the talent, there's a place for you. And this goes with any year you're born. You're not born too late or too soon. There's always opportunity. Because I sort of had this epiphany when I turned 50, right? It's like, oh God, every decade, it's like, oh shit, you can bleep that out. I'm getting older, this and that. But then, I realized with myself, every decade mark I hit, I became more myself. I knew myself better. I understood the world better. And then I met somebody who was like 70, and then it was like, oh yeah, there's always going to be somebody 20 years older or 20 years younger. So you're in the right place. So people, the age thing, throw it out the window. Don't look in the mirror too closely, because that's not how the world sees you.
It's
You-
so
You're
true.
having an internal dialogue that may not be accurate.
Exactly. Don't listen to your crazy self sometimes,
Yeah, exactly. Bank
Yep.
it.
And I just want to say, your work. I mean, how did you? This would be the last question for me. Then, how
Okay.
did you get involved with Storm King? I mean, that's the great John Carpenter. I'm a big horror fan, and now to see you involved again, you continue. Your story is amazing. I mean, going back to
I
them
keep
over
rolling.
40 plus, you keep going. You're a boss. Love it.
People had catch up. It's like, the period of time when I had to learn the digital lettering skills, and nobody would tell me too much. What I did with that time, I learned new skills. I learned how to garden. My good friend Michelle Wrightson, she came to my door one day with a giant hosta plant, and she goes, "Would you like to learn how to garden?" So my husband and I said, "I don't know. There's a spot where it's wet all the time. It's like, because my husband and I grow a lot of plants, but before we moved in the house, we lived in an apartment, so everything was in a flower pot." So then Michelle goes, "Perfect. You need moisture for plants to survive out, of course." So my husband is a graduate of the Fashion Institute of Technology, right? He studied illustration and graphic design. So he's really great at designing. I'm really great at digging holes. And and that means a lot up here, because all you have are rocks,
Hey, and you know what? And that's a scary thought for your hubby there. If you're good at digging holes, you better be a good boy, huh?
He runs fast, so I'm out of luck, right? But I'm really good at nurturing and propagating, making more plants from one.
Oh,
That
beautiful.
really interests me, because, it's like art. There's like always like problem solving. And, it's like I get scared when I go in someone's house and I don't see a live plant. It's like,
You'll be happy with me. I have a plant and I've been raising it for almost 10 years, and she's alive and growing long. I take care of it. Even my mom is surprised. She's like, "You still have that plant?" I'm like, because she had given it to me over 10 years ago.
oh,
She goes, "You
that's
still
sweet.
have it?" I'm like, "Yeah."
You think of your mother when you see the plant, because
Yeah,
she gave it to you. And
yeah, so I take care of it very well.
yeah. So anyway, getting back to the question with John Carpenter, my connection was made with Sandy King Carpenter through Leonardo Manco. He was an artist on the first book I read of his is Werewolf by Night, but he's
Wow.
known at DC for Constantine, Judge Dredd, and a lot of like really intense stuff. So anyway, through Facebook, I saw that Leo was on and we connected. But my son had moved out to California in, let's see, like 11 years ago. So David Wall, who I worked with when he came as assistant and as an editor, he was editor-in-chief at Radical Publishing. So luckily, Calvin was able to be hired in production and design. So Calvin goes to me, "Oh yeah, Leo's doing a series for us called Driver by Night, and he's coming in from Argentina." So I said, "Well, when Leo comes in, tell him I said hello and that you're my son, right?" So Calvin said, that Leo showed up, and he said, "My God, he's so lively and funny, entertaining." And they show him the place. He meets everybody. So when it gets quiet, Calvin walks up to him and goes, hi, I'm Calvin Louis. My mother's Janice Chiang. I'm her son. So Calvin said, Leo was so surprised. He jumped backwards. It's like, what?
Nice. Check that out.
So, so I wrote Leo. I messaged Leo. I messaged a lot of people. It's like, if you're not doing a series with DC, Marvel, or IDW, or Dark Horse, a company with lettering department, would you consider my work? So I sent them samples in my digital work. So Leo wrote me, said, oh, I want to connect you to Sandy King. And it was like, okay. So he said, I want you to letter my series. And if you ever seen Leo's art, it's like, you do not want to cover up anything. It's like so beautiful and gorgeous. So anyway, I started writing to Sandy, through email, asking questions about work. And you're going to laugh, Al, because I didn't know she was Sandy King Carpenter until like a year later.
A year later?
Because, when you work
That's
with a
crazy.
client not in the industry, our job as professionals is help them understand the whole process, not just about lettering, color, layout, visuals. But Sandy is like a force in nature. She paid her dues going up through the ranks of the film industry. She studied animation and art in LA. I forgot which campus in the LA, college university. And she was a script reader for Francis Ford Coppola on his films. And then she told Sandy's so cool. We'll be seeing a convention. We'll just be talking, and somebody walks by with a Star Wars costume, and she goes, "Oh yeah, we made paper airplanes when we were trying to design the spaceships for the Star Wars movie." It was like, holy moly!
What?
Right. We were trying to see how it flew. We would throw paper airplanes to see, the flight, when it was airborne. But going back a little bit, Sandy's dad was a pilot, so she said he taught me how to fly a plane when I was 15 years old.
Oh,
How to
damn.
land it safely. She said basically he took me up there, gave me the wheel, and said, "Go at it."
Whoa.
So I want her on my plane in case there's an emergency, like the pilot has a medical issue. You can get up there and get it down.
Just travel with her anywhere you go, just in case. The backup plan. Plan B is Sandy.
So she's a producer, and she handles John's business end of the movies. And yeah, you better be nice to her, because a lot of times people poo her like, "Oh, you're just a wife." It's like, no, you got it wrong. It's like when people do that, it's like,
Yeah. They shouldn't dismiss. I mean, that's one thing that I love about, Comic Cons, for example, when you see the husband and wife teams, but you see the dude behind the table, or vice versa, and the artist is there. And as soon as you start speaking to them, their spouse comes right around. "Hi, here's their card. Here's this. Feel free to talk. You have a card." But I'm like, wow, that's awesome. That's support.
Teamwork.
Yeah.
In our house, I wouldn't have been able to sit down still to do my work if my husband wasn't the linchpin in the wheel that makes our household run. He raised my son, went to the, PTA meetings and stuff like that, and because I had deadlines, a lot of times they would leave me at home. They would have fun. I would have deadlines, but that's what this industry takes. It's like, if you make a commitment, you have to follow through, because people are depending on you. It's like you don't take a deadline and go on vacation. It's like, come on. Let's see how long you're going to last, right?
Right. And folks, this is awesome, Janice. I mean, that's great advice right there. Love it.
I think the main, aside from your talent and your ability to deliver, it's the trust issue also, because we're dealing with a lot of intellectual property that is not public. So, the client has to feel that you can be entrusted with their brand, that you're not going to go bleep on social media. "Hey, look what I'm doing." Sometimes people do it. It's like, what are you doing that?
Somebody I know from Marvel did that one day. They put the art up, so I just reshared the art, and then they DM me, "I shouldn't have done that. Can you take yours down too?" I'm like, "Oh, wow. Okay. No problem."
Yeah. So, anytime you see that, actually, you should DM somebody. So don't do that. That's not cool. Don't do that.
Right. Shame.
And one last piece of advice I tell everyone, mature, young or mature people, It's like you have a dream here, right? And reality's here. The road you're going to travel is in the middle. So, sometimes, it's like when you go to school, they go, you could be anything you want, right?
Yeah.
That-
Right.
that's such a big lie because, if you don't have the resources, go to school. You can't go to school. It's like I ran out of money. I never finished college, but I was fine for that. My mother was a little upset. I said, don't worry, trust me. I can read and write. I can figure it out. So I think I did okay on that count. Because in our industry, it's the chops you put in with the time and the actual practice of what you do that really counts. So whether you're mature or young, if a dream doesn't pan out, find another dream. It's not a deficiency on your part. It's just a lot of times it's time and place. And if you find another dream, that means you look outward. You find other people because you're not going to solve a problem by yourself. And this was I read a lot of philosophy during that gap from hand lettering to digital lettering because it's like people told me I didn't belong anymore. Not to mention 3 people plagiarized my work.
Wow.
I know who they are. I can look at it. I know my letter forms. I lettered so much. I know what it looks like. You know. So that take as that time, take it as an opportunity to learn new things. Read philosophy because it's like knowledge from people who came before us, their life experiences. Because I tell people, you don't have to make every mistake on the world to learn. That's why we have books. That's why we have history.
True.
That's why we have literature. So find like-minded people who will support you. That's really important. So how I was able to come back in the industry during that period where they said, well, you're a dinosaur, you can't learn. I was like, well, you don't know my parents. I'm coming back. I'm not going away until I'm ready because I'm not done speaking the language of digital lettering.
Woo!
So
Love
but
I love that fire in you. That's
that's
awesome.
the nature of our industry. Look at Stan Lee. He was fighting to the end, and I was so fortunate to be able to meet him with my family in 2016. So I was able to thank him. It was like, thank you for creating a company where I was welcomed, where it provided livelihood. I was able to buy a house, send my son to a college of his choice. I had all these opportunities. I had colleagues and friends in the community, and without his leadership in it, and all the people, Jack Kirby, everyone, Joe Sinnott, who was a good friend, until he passed away. That last hand letter panel of the web of the Spider-Man series. It was for a Sunday issue. It was a tribute to Stan. That was the final one the team worked on. And it's like what's great about my work in the industry is like I meet so many creators because we get teamed up together. So with the hand lettering for the series, Spider-Man series, I got to work with Alex Saviak. I got to work with Larry Lieber, Stanley's brother.
Yeah.
It was like so cool. And then Joe Sinnott, who was one of the original creators of Spider-Man, he inked it with Jack Kirby as the artist, and then Stan and worked on the storyline. So people with the Stanley Jack Kirby school, get over with it. It's a group effort.
Yes, it is.
And it was an honor to letter that series for the King's Feature because Stan was adamant about keeping it going. Because that's where the introduction of young kids to Spider-Man was, the newspapers.
Yeah, many of us. That's definitely for me too. I remember picking up the paper and I had, the Daily News on Sundays.
Yeah, the color version. Oh, did you
Yeah.
have silly putty too, where you?
No, I didn't have the silly putty stuff.
Because it would pick up the ink, so you can get a reverse comic.
Right? Our weird toys from back in the day, folks. Yeah. We had some stuff, but I never got that. But Janice,
you had slime, I think.
yeah, I did have slime though, nasty that my mother hated it because I would throw it onto the wall and she was like, "This is just disgusting. I don't know why I bought you that." Anyway, just want to thank you for your time, Janice. You are a wealth of knowledge and fire. I want to say thank you. Give you your flowers here.
Opportunity to meet your audience.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your creativity, your fire, and everything you've been doing. You're amazing. And I wish you another 40 years in this.
I'll try.
You've been awesome. So, folks, I'm just going to show it another time. Please follow Janice and see everything she's up to. Twitter, Instagram at the Janice Chiang, or on Facebook at Janice Chiang Comic Letterer. Show her the love, show her the support, throw her flowers. You've seen her work. Trust you me. Who hasn't? The whole world has seen her lettering. I'm certain of that. Yeah, and more are going to keep seeing. So continued success in your journey. Much health, love, always. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Folks, you know what to do.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Everybody, everything's in the outro. You know what to do. Hasta la próxima. Thank you for listening to the Comic Crusaders Podcast. If you like the content, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, please visit comiccrusaders.shop and our extended podcast family over at undercovercapes.com. And also, make sure to download the Comic Crusaders app on the Google Play Store today.